Assalamu alaikum and good day everyone. I'm your teacher Muhammad Ikram from Pakistan International School, Taif, KSA. I welcome you all in my today class. Today is our lecture number 15. It is about major sources of energy. So let us start with the name of Allah Almighty. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Major sources of energy. There are two major sources of energy, the non-renewable sources and the renewable sources. The non-renewable sources of energy are those sources of energy which are non-replaceable, limited, they cannot be recreated, and they are only the limited supply and cannot be used sustainably. What are these non-renewable sources of energy? In the next slide, I am going to explain one by one. The second is the uh, renewable sources of energy. Now, what are the renewable sources of energy? The renewable sources of energy are those sources of energy which are replaceable, which can be recreated, and these are usually they are unlimited in supply and can be used sustainably. Now, let us explain all these in our next slide. The non-renewable sources of energy, which I told you in the previous slide, they are non-replaceable. They cannot be recreated. Once consumed, consumed forever. We cannot reprocess or regenerate. And according to your syllabus, there are two, fossil fuel and the nuclear fuel. Let we explain these one by one. First of all, the fossil fuels. Now, what are the fossil fuels? They are the oil, natural gas, coal energy, they are all collectively called the fossil fuels. First, how they are formed, I will explain their formation, the advantages, the disadvantages, and the disadvantages and the disadvantages and their effect on our environment. So let us see first about the formation. The fossil fuel the fossil fuels are, in fact, they are formed within the earth from dead plants and animals over million years, over million of years. Now, how they are look? See here, you see here, that is the plants. Look, see the plants as you see in the diagram here, the plants, as you see these plants, look, the plants under very high pressure and heat, that is the pressure and heat work together to transform these plants or animal remainings into crude oil, that is petroleum or oil. You see that like over million and million of years ago, they are under very high pressure and heat, because you know, as you go down the earth crust, right, as you go down the earth crust, you see, look, then what happens that the pressure increases, and as you go down the temperature also increases. So under very high pressure and temperature, these plants and the remaining of the animals, they turns into what? Crude oil. The crude oil contains petroleum product like natural gas, petroleum, diesel, etc. Right? Then industry is used, right, to industry is used to pump them from what? From that from the earth crust, right? And then they are turned into what? Turned into useful fuel. So this is how they are farmed. Now how they are used, see here, their uses, how they are being used. When they, when these fuel, when they are burned, energy is released. So in the presence of oxygen, when petrol, diesel, when they are burned, then energy is released during this process. Now what are the advantages of such fuels? The advantages fuels are that such kind of fuels, they store chemical energy. Remember, chemical energy, the chemical energy is stored, right? Now, when we burn such fuel, then what happens? That heat energy is produced, as you see that here right now. Look in this animation, like cool. Now, when you burn in the presence of oxygen, heat energy is produced. Now, that heat energy is used for various purposes. For example, here you see we use this heat energy to cook food. This heat energy is used to produce electricity. Here in for our transportation system, you see we use these petroleum. When they burn, then they drive the wheels of our car, and this is how our transportation works. So this is what the uses of such kind of energy. Rather, almost 90%, I would like to say, of the transportation use the fossil fuels to generate energy. Now, one of the that is the most advantageous point about the fossil fuel is that such kind of engine, they that is which use the fossil fuels, they are round from 30 to 40% 40% efficient. So their efficiency is what? Greater efficiency, produce more energy. That less fuel have a lot of energy. The disadvantages is, as you see here, look, that what is going to happen. You see that this is not environmental friendly. You see carbon dioxide and some harmful gases are being released when such kind of fuels are burned into the atmosphere, which affects the ozone layer, and which cause many other problems. For example, that is it has a bad effect on our lives, right? For example, they cause many illness and disease. So these are the fossil, about the fossil fuels. Now the question is that when they burns, so how they produce energy. You see that if we have the here, let me write it here. For example, see here, if you have the carbon dioxide, when the carbon dioxide, when there is oxygen, they both together, they produce what? They produce carbon dioxide, right? Plus heat energy. Energy. Which energy? Heat. Oh, very difficult to write in this. So they produce the heat energy. Now there is then these hydrocarbons. Further, the hydrocarbon plus oxygen, they produce carbon dioxide plus water and plus heat energy, right? The fossil fuels, as I told you, took million of years in their formation. They are the non-renewable. This is the summary. We use the fossil fuels at the very fast rate. because of much of our transportation industry, they are run by the fossil fuel, right? So this one of the disadvantages of this is it will run out very quickly. Maybe in 100 year or 150 year they will all last. So once when we exhausted with this kind of energy, then we it wouldn't be anymore available to us, right? And another disadvantage is that, as you know, that the population grows, so these energy resources wouldn't be enough to meet our future demand. So this will create social and economical impacts on the countries, right? So therefore, we must use these energies very wisely. For example, instead of using our own cars, we should use buses, train, like that. Uh, so that these are all about the fossil fuels. The next date is that such fuels are not environmental friendly, right? Because they cause pollution. So that is one in this. Let me see. Okay, so let us move to the next slide. Here you see that the another non-renewable sources of energy is the nuclear fuel. Now, what is the nuclear fuel? As I told you earlier in the previous lecture, that nuclear energy is in fact, in the case of the nuclear energy, see, if you remember, I told you about this earlier also, that in fact the nuclear energy is what it is, the uh, transformation of what it is, the transformation, sorry, the transformation of matter, matter into energy. This is how energy is converted into what, sorry, how matter or mass is converted into what, energy. So the nuclear fuel, in fact, based on one of the Einstein famous mass energy equation, E is equal to mc square. Here E is the amount of energy released, m is the mass, that is when destroyed, and c is the speed of light. So you see that when you convert mass into energy, a huge amount of energy will be released, right? And you know that c is the speed of light, and this speed of light is 3 into 10 raised to the power 8 meter per second, as you see. So f, for example, look at this equation, m equals E by c square. So you see that, look, when you take the square of this, when you square this, so you see that this is a huge number, right? What is that? For example, it will become like, for example, 9 into 10 raised to the power 16, like that. So you see that. Now look, when you convert, how, for example, at least to convert one mass of what, 1 kilogram of what, 1 kilogram of mass, then you have to what, supply this much or this amount of energy first to convert 1 kilogram of mass into energy. Although 1 kilogram of mass is a very large quantity of matter for this kind of reaction. So you see that this can be done either by, how we can convert this, either by accelerating this mass to a very high velocity, or by increasing the temperature of the mass to accelerate to this value, so that it should be converted into energy. For this purpose, the fuel used is what, the fuel usually used is uranium, mostly uranium 235 or like that, that is element, this one. Now you see that This process, the nuclear, there are two kind of nuclear processes here. For this, we prefer the fission reaction. See the fission reaction like this. So look, the fission reaction, you see we have the heavy, look here, the heavy nucleus. When it is bombarded with the neutron, it splits into what? Into two nuclei, further lighter nuclei, along with the release of 3 neutron plus surplus energy, right? That energy we use to produce electricity. The energy is usually associated, the kinetic energy, with these particles. As you see, this particle, another particle, look like this particle, these particles. So when the nucleus splits, energy released, and another, the three particles which are produced, they have kinetic energy, and when they pass through the water, so they transfer their kinetic energy into the water. In turn, the temperature of the water increases. You see here the fuel rods. So now look, there are fuel rods when there is a nuclear reaction. So what is going to happen? You see that they heat up the water at a very high temperature. Steam is produced. That steam is used to run what? The steam is used to run turbine. You just see, look, there are two category of waters here in this one here, and look, one here, as you see. Now what is going to happen? Look, this, when this kind of the water, when it is heated indirectly, this water is heated indirectly. Look, one is this water that is at a very high temperature and pressure. What happens? It heat up this water, this portion of water, and it is then changed into steam, right? And that steam is used to run turbine. The turbine then turns what? The generator. This is what? This is generator. As you see, this is generator, like that. Clear? And that generator is then used to turn electricity, and then electricity is being supplied here. Now, there are the advantages and disadvantages of what? Of the nuclear energy. The advantages of the nuclear energy is that, look, within small quantity of mass, we can create a large amount of energy. That is one advantage. For example, that you might have heard about this in the last lecture. Even I told you that the modern submarine, you see that they are usually powered by nuclear engine, and that is, they can travel deep under the ocean for 6 months without refueling. There are the spaceships, the Voyager 1 and 2, you might have heard about that were sent into space in 1973, and they still continue to move. They are powered by engine. The Curiosity rover on Mars mission, the Curiosity rover, you might have heard about that also. That is one of the Mars mission, and that is powered by nuclear engine. And the predictable life of that vehicle, the Curiosity rover, was around, I think, for 2 years, and it still continue to work. So that is, it will last for a quite longer time. The disadvantages are that it is accompanied by radioactive wastes, right? The radioactive waste one, the radioactive waste one is this problem, and the second problem is the nuclear radiation. The nuclear radiation, right? Which are okay. So you see that the radioactive waste should be wisely disposed of. It should be buried far away from the built-in area, 1,000 feet deep. Why? Because the process of radioactivity never completely die. Even when the fuel intensity much reduced, still they will radiate some nuclear radiation. So this is why the dispose of is a bigger problem. The second is the nuclear radiation, right? The nuclear radiation, they, you know that the alpha, beta, gamma, and you will learn these in the higher classes, that they are, these nuclear radiation are harmful for our lives once it exceeds a stated dose. So there is, if we are exposed to such kind of radiation, then this will be a greater threat to our life. And you might have heard about the Great Chernobyl incidents, right? That and in the tsunami once when happened in Japan, that the nuclear that is the nuclear reactor damaged during that tsunami, and the radiation escaped into the atmosphere, right? And then these radiation are very harmful to our lives. They create many problems, many illness, which you will learn in the coming classes. So that is the all about what? That is all about the nuclear fuel. Second, that the advantages, as I told you, there are many advantages there. That is, they can be used for war, and although war is a disadvantage, a kind of war, because it will bring destruction. That is, lethal weapon can be prepared by using these nuclear fuel. So it is. That is a kind of disadvantages, but the advantages is that we can use the nuclear radiation for the treatment of various illness. We can use this for in industry. We can use this in agriculture, right? So there are various advantages and disadvantages of the nuclear fuel, right? So now let us move to the next level. Here we have the renewable sources of energy: hydel energy, energy from the sun, wind energy, geothermal energy, and energy, sorry, I wrote it wrong, energy from a biomass, right? So let us discuss them one by one. As you see, look, the first we have the hydel energy. Hydel energy, it is what the energy which we obtain from the moving water. So the first, that is why it is a renewable source of energy, because it can be regenerated, it can be replaced again and again. We can reuse such kind of energies. Now, how? As you see, look, see here, look, as you see this process, look at this thing, that when the ocean or water, as you see here, look, you see when the sunlight falls on it, right? So due to the process of evaporation, it evaporates into the atmosphere. As you see, why? When it's heat up, it escapes into the atmosphere, and you see what happens as it rises up. Look what is going to happen. You see that, look, they change into clouds, right? Then the clouds in turn back changes into rain, and the water comes again here. Look, these, see the mountains, and on the everywhere you see, look what the snow, then the snow melt again, and it become what? And it become waters. And when these water arrives, right, they are being collected in dams. Here you see, look, dams are being constructed here. Water is being stored in a dam, and you know that water is being stored in a dam, then such kind of water has which kind of energy? The potential energy, if you remember, mgh, like that. So the potential energy is stored here. Now we use that potential energy to that is the energy which is stored, right, in water in a dam. We use that potential energy to create what? To create electricity. How? You see, look at this thing, the water. When the water flows, then we have the moving water. That moving water have a kinetic energy, and when it arrives here, you see they run turbine. The turbines run generator, and the generator produce electricity. The electricity is then sent into towns, cities, and where it is needed. And you see the discharge water. Look, when the water is discharged, the discharge water is used for various purposes, drinking, irrigation, like that. So it has the kind of disadvantage that the advantages. The advantages, this is environmental friendly. The first advantage, it is renewable, right? They, that is, it is for the ecological system, best for the ecological system, like we have. So, and the disadvantages is because, the dam can be filled, right? And when they fill, so there are some sediments or rock, they deposit in the dam, and the dam is then filled. So cleaning a bigger dam is a big issue, right? Second, when if the dam breaks, then it brings destruction, right? So large holding a large quantity of water together is dangerous in some way. So the benefits are reducing electricity for drinking, right, and for agriculture purposes, irrigation. So that are the advantages. And it is, as I told you, environmental friendly. It is renewable because it does not produce any pollution, any harmful gases into the atmosphere. So that is the advantages of such kind of renewable source of energy, hydel energy. Now, let us see here we have energy from the sun. This is how we obtain the energy from the sun, the formation, because sun is the usually, as I in my previous classes I told you, that it is the ultimate source of energy. If you remember, I told you once that it is what? That it is the ultimate source of energy. The earth gets its entire energy from the sun in one way or the other. So you know that when the sun light and heat energy, when the sunlight energy arrives onto the ground, then there are sorry, onto the earth. When they arrive onto the earth, then what happens here, that we use the solar cells. One is solar cell and one is solar panel. Solar cell. These solar cells, uh, they are also called the photocells. Photocell. These photocells or solar cells have the ability to convert light energy into electrical energy. Light energy into what? Light energy into electrical energy. They convert light energy into what? Into electrical energy. Then that electrical energy, as you see, the electrical energy is then used for various purposes. For example, they can be used for solar housing heating system. They can be used to generate electricity. Here, or look, this is solar house heating system. Here you see that here what is going to happen. You see that there are the system, that is, you just see, look, the sun rays or the sunlight when fall on that, then there is the water channels beneath it. That water channels, you see, when it is heated, that is when it heats the water, there are copper piping system. So the hot water, as you see, just look, this, when the water is heated, you know that the hot water always rises to the top, then, and it is then distributed in the house. And the cold water always sink. When it is cold, it is then sink, and it is then repumped back into this channel. And this is how the sunlight, you see, it is being what? Converted into what? It is being converted into heat energy. Here we convert the sun. This is here heat. It is converted what? That heat energy. The heat energy is used to what? Heat up water, and that water, hot water, is then circulated into the entire house, and the house is kept warm during winter. Here, what is the same thing there? Here, what we are using? Here we are using the sun energy to produce what? To produce electricity. This is for the production of what? For the production of electricity. Here you see that these solar panels, they are called, this is called the solar panel. This is a solar panel. Solar panel. Now this one, a single piece is called a solar cell, right? So when large solar cells, when they are gathered it on one sheet, then they forms the solar panel. So the electricity produced by each cell is then combined and a high voltage is created. You see, look, the solar panel produce a large quantity of electrical energy. Then it is stored in a battery, right? And when it is needed, it is used. You see here, look, electricity is then being supplied to towns or like that, to the airports. Even in the modern world there are aeroplanes which are they are now still on the experimental basis, but they are being powered by solar energy. Vehicle you have seen, watches you have seen, calculators you have seen, almost solar energy is used in them. The disadvantages are likely less. One disadvantage is, for example, where there is the sunlight available, not available all around, then we cannot use this. For example, when the area or the region where it is most often cloud, then you wouldn't be able to get the solar energy quite for a longer time, right? So that is one of the disadvantage. Second, that is that for the continuous supply or steady supply, we must use batteries to store the energy, because at night time there is no solar energy available, so we need to store them first. But the advantages are even more. For example, look, the International Space Station, right, where there is no direct, where it is not directly powered from the Earth, is we do not have any resources to keep it powered for a longer time. So the International Space Station, you have seen, it is powered by the solar energy. So that is the uh, advantages. And the disadvantages, I told you, it is environmental friendly, it does not produce any sort of pollution, right, or nice or harmful gases or radioactive waste. So that is another sources of energy. The third one is the wind energy. The wind energy, as I told you earlier in the previous lecture, that the wind energy is, in fact, the wind is a moving air. So using the moving air to provide the mechanical power to turn the electrical generator. So that is the wind energy. You see here right now, look, uh, see here, uh, look. See here, they, in this case, look, see here, what is going to happen? This is what? This is the windmill. Now, you know that when the air is moving, then the blades of the windmills, it rotates the blades of the windmill. Here you see, now look what happens. This is then connected to what? It is connected to the generator, right? And then the generator is rotated. You see, look, then, and it is then produce electricity, and then that electricity is transferred. See here the blades, the rotor part, and the its system part. Each part perform their own job. For example, they it left rotate when it hit by the wind, causing the rotor to spin. Here the combination of the blades and hub, like that. And here you see that is, it is the tower, it is this tower, like that, right? So that it is because to get maximum use of the wind, right? And then you see these are the various part, the controller part, and then this is the generator part, how this electricity is then generated. right? The disadvantages is that the electricity generated by this system is less in quantity, so therefore we need a large number of windmills together at one place we call the wind field, right? So that to produce the electricity in a greater quantity. The advantages are that it is available for free in one way, you can say. The second important point is that it, however, because since we have a lot in number, so it can produce noise pollution at least, but it is environmental friendly in a sense that it doesn't produce any harmful gases, smokes, or things like that. So that is one of the advantage, that it is the environmental friendly. The disadvantage is the noise pollution, right? Noise pollution, and second, that large number of windmills are needed. Okay, so that is, instead of having one generator, you have to produce many generators, right? So and then you are arrange them together in one field. So that is one of the disadvantage. The next source is the geothermal energy. Now, what are the geothermal energy? The geothermal energy is, in fact, it is the energy that is provided, that provides us, that provide us by the hot water from the geyser and hot spring. There is hot molten part deep in the earth, and we call that magma. Water reaching close to the magma changes to steam due to the high temperature of what? Due to the high temperature of the magma. This energy we call the geothermal energy, and we use this geothermal energy to produce electricity or to keep our house warm in an area where there is extreme cold. So you see that, look how this thing happens, that the water are being pumped into the earth crust, the core water, right? First it is then heated, and another, this is, you just see, look what is going to happen. The cold water are being pumped into it, right? And when it is heated by that hot molten magma in the rock, the water is then what? The hot water always rises to the top. It is then rises to the top in the form of steam. The steam used to run turbine, and turbine runs generator, and electricity is being produced. Here you just see, look at this diagram. Here in this diagram you see, let me explain it to you. Here the bar. Now look, here you see what is going to happen. That is, there is a blue pipe system, and there is what? There is this clay kind of pipe system. Here you see what is going to happen. The water is being first pumped into into it, the cold water, and then what happens? The cold water, that is, this is the cold water. As you see, look, the cold water are being pumped into the earth crust, like that one here. Here you see, due to a very high temperature, the water is then heated. The hot water always rises to the top while the cold water sinks. So it rises up here. Okay, and then what happens? It is then used to produce electricity. As I told you, here there is another by using this mechanism. Since that is a very small portion, so I show it separately here, like at this point. It then, the water is then used to run turbine. The turbine runs generator, electricity is produced, and the water that is consumed at that temperature then drop, and it is then being pumped again into what? It is then pumped again into the cold reservoir, like that. It is being cooled and then pumped again, like this one. So this is one of what? The renewable sources of energy, as you see. Look here, in this case, the next uh, sources of energy is the energy from the biomass. Biomass are the plants or the animal material used for energy production for the energy production. There is electricity or heat. Usually it is from the decomposition of the biodegradable substances. So you see, look, what is going to happen here. During this process, the energy from the biomass, as I told you, that biomass is a plant or animal waste that can be burned as a fuel, right? When animal dung, dead plants or dead animal, when they decompose, since they are biodegradable, they give off a mixture of methane and carbon dioxide. Electricity can be then generated by burning these gases or the methane. So here you see, look, that is how the biodegradable substances here, as you see, look, uh, you see, look, you see here, these are the biodegradable substances, food waste, that is from the livestock or like that. Okay, it is then, as you see, they are being decomposed through in aerobic digestion tank, as you see here. When they decompose, they produce that methane gas. The methane gas is used, it is then burned, and when it is burned, heat energy is generated. That heat energy is then used to produce what it is used to produce um, electricity. How? For example, hot water produce steam. Steam is used to run turbine. Turbine is used to run turbine is used to run generator, and then generator produce electricity, as you know this process. So this is another form of what? This is another form of the another form of renewable form of energy. The disadvantage here is that it is not environmental friendly, right? Why? Because it produce during the burning process, it produce the harmful gases that escape into the atmosphere. So this is why it might not be very much useful in that sense. Second, the mechanism is very complex, and it cannot be used for transportation purposes or like that. So that is one of the reason or one of the disadvantages. But the greatest advantage is that it is renewable, right? So that is what about the energy from the biomass. So these were the main renewable sources of energy. So hope you have learned from the today lesson, right? And these were all the major sources of energy: renewable, non-renewable, non-renewable too, the fossil fuels and the nuclear fuels, and the renewable energy sources were five, and I explain it to you. So this is the uh, end of our today lecture. Inshallah, see you in the next lecture, and that is the most important one. That is the power efficiency and power, and inshallah we will discuss those in great detail. So thank you very much.